Welcome back, everyone. Since you've already waded through the rigorous, frankly, reality-bending logic of the previous chapters of Nāgārjuna's Mūlamadhyamakakārikā, you know the drill by now. We are skipping the beginner's orientation today. Instead, we're stepping directly back into the clinic to run our 11-step Madhyamaka diagnostic, specifically focusing in on Chapter 12. Our mission in this explainer is pretty monumental. We are going to systematically dismantle the absolute continuity of dukkha, or suffering. So here is the clinical roadmap for today. We'll start with the triad of suffering, move on to applying the tetralemma, explore emptiness and co-origination, then scale up to the generalized tetralemma, and finally wrap things up with primordial suchness. All right, let's dive right into Section 1, the triad of suffering. We kick off Phase 1 by isolating our metaphorical patient for Step 1 of the diagnostic. And that patient is the deeply held, almost universally accepted assumption of karmic continuity. You know what I'm talking about. It's that hardwired belief that there is an absolute unbroken chain connecting an action you commit to the suffering you experience later. In Step 1, we need to clearly identify the three spheres at play in the production of suffering. First up, we have the actor, the producer. This is the personality, essentially the 5 aggregates before. Second, there's the action itself, which is the actual production of the karma or the suffering. And third, the result, the reaper, the 5 aggregates after that actually have to sit there and experience that suffering. Now, you might be wondering, why does this triad feel so incredibly intuitive to us? Well, it's because the dualistic mind evolved to survive by slicing a very fluid reality into discrete, manageable chunks. We instinctively reify the doer and the experiencer as solid, independent entities traveling through time, dragging their karmic luggage right along with them. This brings us to the absolutely crucial question Nāgārjuna poses. Are the producer and the reaper the exact same continuing personality, or are they completely different? Is the suffering produced by the identical 5 aggregates, entirely different ones, both or neither? This right here is the fundamental assumption of swabhava, inherent existence. I want you to take a moment to really feel the weight of this assumption, because literally the entire framework of how we normally understand action, consequence, and our own identity rests on this specific pivot point. And this is exactly the assumption we're about to put under the microscope. Moving right along to Section 2, applying the tetralemma. It's time to lock this assumption into the 4-cornered logic gate and bring in the heavy machinery we're so familiar with. By examining Nāgārjuna's specific verses in Chapter 12, we watch this crucible systematically crush all 4 extremes regarding the relationship between the producer and the reaper. Just think about the first position. If the 5 aggregates before and the 5 aggregates after are absolutely identical, meaning suffering is totally self-produced, we hit a massive logical wall. As Nāgārjuna points out, if a thing creates itself, it must already exist, right? If the reaper already exists intrinsically within the producer, then causality is just a frozen stasis. The whole action of producing karma becomes completely redundant. But okay, what if they are different? If suffering is other-produced, meaning the producer and reaper are absolutely separate, inherently existing entities, causality totally breaks down. There is no intrinsic link, no bridge across that ontological gap. If the aggregates of this exact moment are inherently different from the aggregates of the next moment, the actions of one personality could arbitrarily result in the suffering of a completely unrelated personality. And that destroys the entire logical framework of karma. I mean, why on earth should you reap what someone else inherently sowed? Now, trying to argue both self-produced and other-produced, that's mutually contradictory. It's like trying to draw a square circle. And finally, arguing neither suggests that suffering just arises randomly without any cause at all. This is essentially an attempt to smuggle inherent existence in through the back door by claiming things just pop into reality completely on their own, resulting in causeless chaos that defies all observable reality. So every single corner of the logic gate completely collapses, which naturally leads us to Section 3, emptiness and co-origination. Because every single logical position in the tetralemma led to a glaring contradiction, we move to Steps 3 and 4 to face the ultimate diagnosis. We have to conclude there is no absolute continuity, nor is there absolute discontinuity. The actor, the action of karma, and the resulting suffering are entirely empty of inherent existence. They are, in reality, completely inseparable and co-defined. You literally cannot have a producer without a product, and you cannot have a reaper without the karma that was produced. They are dependently co-originated. They are mere conceptual designations, conventional tools imputed by the mind onto a fluid, ever-changing process. There is no eternal personality surviving from one moment to the next, nor is there an annihilated one.
Arriving at step 5, we note the union of the two truths. And honestly, if you take away just one thing from this explainer today, let it be this. Emptiness is not nothingness. It is the exact flexibility that allows the conventional fractal loop of karma to actually turn. Think about it. If the producer had a solid, unchanging essence, they could never ever evolve into the reaper. The lack of absolute inherent continuity is precisely the mechanism that allows cause and effect to function perfectly on a conventional level.
Step 6 really crystallizes this reality for us. The chain of consciousness, from the very moment of karmic production to the moment of suffering, is a highly functional mirage. Just like an echo in a canyon, it functions flawlessly. The sound bounces back and you definitely hear it. But if you reach out and try to grab it, there's no solid core. The triad of suffering is entirely a dependently originated echo. It is absolutely there conventionally, yet absolutely not there inherently. Let's shift gears now into section 4, the generalized tetralemma. To ensure we don't accidentally reify this concept of emptiness into some new dogmatic religion, which, by the way, is the ultimate philosophical trap, step 7 brings in the generalized tetralemma. We must apply our analytical solvent to the very concepts of emptiness and dependent origination themselves. We affirm that the spheres and reality itself are not this, not non-this, not both, and not neither. Reality completely evades every conceptual enclosure we try to build for it. Any word you use to describe absolute reality, whether you call it continuous, discontinuous, one, or many, is fundamentally inadequate because words demand boundaries, and reality has none. Reality is beyond all conditioned dualistic conceptual proliferation. Moving into step 9, and we're jumping past step 8 here as it's not strictly required for this specific deconstruction, we adopt the middle way. And doing this means radically abandoning all these cognitive extremes regarding the producer and the reaper. We drop objectivism, which claims absolute reality. We drop nihilism, which claims nothing matters. We even drop monism, the idea of a giant undifferentiated cosmic blob. We must also drop relationism and processism. Why? Because to have a relation, you fundamentally need two inherently existing nodes to relate to each other, which we literally just proved are empty. And a process implies an inherent flow from an established point A to an established point B. The middle way has absolutely nothing to seek in absolute terms and nothing to reject in absolute terms. Finally, let's move into section 5, primordial suchness. So let's get into the application phase with steps 10 and 11 to see how we actually live this realization. Because let's be real, we still have to wake up, go to work, and function in a conventional world where actions absolutely have consequences. Step 10 requires acting without acting. This means utilizing your 5 aggregates conventionally as the functional tools they are. You still prepare for your day, you still aim to avoid causing harm, and you respect conventional dependent origination. But you do it completely without ever projecting absolute permanence onto the producer or the reaper. You engage fully in the world, for sure, but you wear the world lightly. Step 11 is the ultimate perceptual shift. You begin to perceive everything as primordially equal, pure, and complete. And here's where it gets profoundly beautiful. When you deeply realize that there is no absolute boundary whatsoever between the karmic producer and the reaper, boundless compassion arises completely naturally. It's no longer a heavy moral duty. When you see that the inside is continuously becoming the outside, saving another person from suffering becomes as purely logical and instinctual as your left hand pulling your right hand out of a fire. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this final diagnostic thought to chew on. If time itself is an empty triad, where the past producer is an illusion that's already gone, and the future reaper is an illusion entirely unwritten, then your anxieties and regrets lack inherent existence too. Without an eternal or an annihilated personality, what is actually left of you to cling to? The present moment is the only illusion you have to work with. Rest in that suchness, and I'll see you in the next analysis.